Now it's time for our final review of the evening and our last big thing of the evening, as after this the show is pretty much going to be done and dusted. It's time for my review of Selma. Now this is based upon Martin Luther King's march in at Selma, Alabama in 1965. On IMDb, it describes it as being epic, and it is proof, if ever it were needed, that to make an epic movie, it doesn't need to be 3 hours long with giant robots thumping each other for 90 minutes. I am somebody who, having seen it, is surprised, honestly surprised, that David Oyelowo has not been nominated for a Best Actor nomination at the Oscars, because he is simply fantastic in this movie. I know that this isn't new news by any stretch or means of the imagination, but he is simply stunning to watch within this movie. There are very few words I can think of to describe it other than brilliant, fantastic, multifaceted. It is a performance which, and this may sound incredibly odd, but it makes Martin Luther King feel human. Now, I know that some people that may seem odd, but let me explain. When we had the Theory of I Think movie from a couple of weeks ago, one of the problems I had with it was that there wasn't really enough time to really make Stephen Hawking feel like a real person. We all know about the great things that Stephen Hawking's done. We all know about the great things that Martin Luther King did. However, within this movie, we do get a sense of the real man behind, effectively, the myth of who he was, which is great. It is fantastic. And one of the things you've got to bear in mind with this movie is that they, for legal reasons, couldn't use any of Martin Luther King's speeches. So, as a result, many of it had to be adapted and rewritten and paraphrased to some degree, but you don't get that feeling whilst you're watching it. I think it is remarkable, certainly from the writing standpoint, that the speeches that David Oyelowo delivers in this movie feel so much like you're listening to Martin Luther King deliver them. Like I say, it's a performance which does make Martin Luther King feel like a real person, someone who is genuinely identifiable, as there are moments within this movie where you see the doubt, when you see the fatigue, you can see it and you can hear it within the tone within his voice. There's a moment midway through the movie where he's wondering whether or not that he is on the right course of action, whether protesting in Selma is the right thing to do, when he could be spending the time campaigning about poverty and education. It is great. It is truly a wonderful performance that David Oyelowo performs and gives us within this movie, and the fact that he isn't nominated is remarkable. I would say, to certain degrees, he is better than Eddie Redmayne, because once again, you feel like you are seeing the really Martin Luther King. You are seeing a real human being rather than some kind of fallacy, some kind of almost greatest hits version of him. And this movie as a whole prevents getting your typical biopic greatest hits thing by being so focused. This is about the march within Selma, Alabama. This isn't about Martin Luther King's life as a whole. It's just one focused moment which makes it feel, to certain degrees, like just part of a greater campaign. Like you're watching, in some regards, like an epic war movie. That it is the part of one part of a greater struggle, which many people would argue that it is still part of a greater struggle about race and how that is seen and how that's treated in America. I am in awe, honestly in awe with Oyelowo's performance on every level, from the tone to the physicality. It is remarkable. But of course, there are other great performances in the movie that I fear have been overlooked to a certain degree. For example, you do have Tim Roth in this, who is just this wonderfully slimy, nasty character. He plays Governor George Wallace, who is this horrible, bigoted, disastrously nasty man, who is wickedly bitter to everybody, even the President of the United States. This is a moment towards the third act of the movie where the President sits George Wallace down and effectively says, could you not do this? Could you just tone it down a little bit, because you're ruining everything for everybody. And the governor's response to it is just to effectively stick his fingers up at the president. I find it amazing you can have such a loathsome character, a character with such a great superiority complex, even above his own commander-in-chief, as it were. Of course, the president is played by Tom Wilkinson, who, too, is great. He has this great sense of statement like qualities to him. I know there has been some controversy around his performance and around his depiction within this movie, as to some people it suggests that he was dragging his feet around the whole civil rights issue. However, the way that to me that it's played within the movie feels like he is trying his best to run a country that's as big as an issue as civil rights is to him. He still has to run everything else. He still has to worry about the Russians. He still has to worry about the national debt. I loved this movie. The only part of it that does feel like a bum note to it is the wife, Martin Luther King's wife within this, which feels rather underwritten. There is a part of this movie where it does talk about their relationship and the strain that effectively having someone as big and influential as Martin Luther King, how that works for you in a domestic sense, is only briefly touched upon, where it itself is fascinating. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more than that, but what we do get as a general thing is fantastic. Seeing effectively Martin Luther King, for want of a better word, in the flesh, even though it is just a performance by an actor, is great. To see him perform, David Alayu perform this movie, is wonderful. It feels as if you're seeing Martin Luther King, but more importantly, it feels as though you're seeing a true human being. You're not seeing some idolised depiction of him, one which is without flaw. Martin Luther King is a human being. He was a human being. He had his flaws, he had his issues, but at the end of the day, he did wonderful, brilliant things. And to see a depiction of him which shows him with his flaws, shows him tired, shows him just wanting peace, is great. As it then creates a character which is fully three-dimensional, who, as the movie goes on, you really want to get behind, so that when the big nasty things are happening to him and his fellow campaigners, it actually has an impact with you. And that is something that was missing for me with Theory of Everything, that when the bad things happened to Stephen Hawking, we didn't have quite the same impact, because not a lot of time was spent to develop him. I know, once again, I'm not the kind of film critic like to compare movies, but to see a biopic, to see a movie like this, where time is actually spent to develop effectively the character Martin Luther King, to make us care for him and his fellow campaigners, so that when the bad things do happen, we do have a genuine emotional investment in it, is fantastic. I love this movie from start to finish. The fact that David Alayu once again has not been nominated for Best Actor, I find simply astounding at the Oscars. The fact that our director Ava DuRava has, sorry, I know I've mispronounced that, but the fact that she hasn't been nominated for Best Director once again is another astounding thing. She's great, he's great, the supporting cast are great. It is a fantastic movie. If there are two movies that you're going to see this month, make it be Selma and Shaun the Sheep. I know it's like an incredibly weird connection to do, but to be honest with you, it is brilliant and amazing. Support this movie in any way, shape or form that you can. It is a brilliant movie and an important movie.